Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of Atom India chapter, and welcome you to this very next session of webinar at the rate tea time. And the topic today is one of the most burning topics that's been there for years and yet very relevant even today, is growing need to blood safety. Is NAT the answer? The discussion will be taken on by very eminent speakers who have a lot of experience behind them and have been stalwarts in their field for a very long time. And I would like to welcome Dr. Sangeeta Pathak, who needs no introduction to give the welcome address. Dr. Sangeeta Pathak is a principal consultant in head transfusion medicine, Max Super Speciality Hospital, Saket, New Delhi. She's the organizing secretary of TransCon 2015, office bearer of Atom India chapter, general secretary India Delhi chapter ISPTI, chairperson North Zonal Council ISPTI, treasurer ISPTI. She's a recipient of the J.J. Jolly Award for the year 2013, and also as an experienced NABH assessor, faculty for the NABH member of implementation programs. And she has many other accolades to her credit and lots of international and national publications under her sleeve. Welcome, Dr. Sangeeta.
Thank you. So hello, everyone, and a very good afternoon to all of you. I'm so happy and excited to see you all virtually at this discussion at tea time. We are going through this excellent learning and sharing experience amidst these difficult times, though now we have new ray of hope with significant achievement through vaccination drive towards better, healthy times ahead. In the next few days, we shall meet during our important annual event, AABB Atoms 16th Joint Conference and the third Joint Conference on 3rd and 4th December virtually. And I firmly believe that the conference will allow all of us to have great learning and sharing and connecting experience. Today, we are having an exciting and much talked topic of our interest towards maximizing the level of safety with the help of technologies, as growing need of blood safety is not the answer. The implementation and adoption have been growing, while we need to support and work towards uniform quality and access of safe blood to our patients across the country. Today we have sessions and a very interesting quiz section and a power-packed panel discussion as usual of the discussion at tea time. Let's dive together for a greater cause towards improving patients' lives. Thank you so much and enjoy the session. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Sangeeta. And now I would like to call upon the chairpersons for the session. Dr. Sangeeta would be chairing this session along with Dr. Sadhna Mangwana. Dr. Sadhna Mangwana is a senior consultant and head transfusion medicine and immunohematology department at Sir Action Balaji Medical Institute, New Delhi. She has more than 33 years of experience under her sleeve and has been a member of the executive committee of the National Hemovigilance Program India, co-chair working group Asian Association of Transfusion Medicine for AABB Quality Certificate Program, recipient of the National Awards, President Award 1971, J.R. Jolly Award 2015, reviewer of journals and editors, namely IGBTI, and certified assessor for national accreditation programs for hospitals and laboratory by QCI. Several publications, more than 40 publications to her credit, and is a guest faculty in international and national forums. Over to you, Dr. Sangeeta and Dr. Sadhna.
Dr. Sadhna, you can introduce the first speaker.
Okay. Today's first talk is on the topic algorithm for NAT testing current update, and it is being dealt by Dr. Sangeeta Agarwal. As Dr. Sangeeta Agarwal is senior consultant and HOD at Fortis FMRI Gurgaon, one of the Fortis group of hospitals, and she is NABH blood bank assessors. Over to you, Dr. Sangeeta Agarwal. We have too many Sangeetas around us. So, Dr. Sangeeta Agarwal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, ma'am. And I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to this forum and to share the current updates on NAT algorithm. So, is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Yes, go ahead.
And you're audible as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So, I would like to first define what is algorithm, because it is something which we need to understand and then define it. So algorithm, which is a stepwise representation of a solution to a given problem, and it makes it easy to understand and to solve it. So in our day-to-day, if we have an algorithm which is created, which are 1, 2, 3, 4 steps created for any initial problem which was there, and we don't know how to go about it, and it becomes a bit chaotic to come to an outcome. So it kind of uniforms the whole process to whoever is using the same procedures. So it needs an input, and that input is in the form of discussions, debates, arguments, inputs from the experts who give how and experienced people to how to go about it. And then it has an outcome, and that outcome is the end result, which is a solution to that problem or outcome, desired result, whatever we want to have. Then what are the advantages when we create an algorithm? So algorithm is important because it creates a definite procedure, and it has steps which are easy to understand, simple to follow, and everybody knows what it means. It is not dependent on any programming language. There is no coding. There are no special features for it. And everybody who is involved in it can understand it easily. It has its own, every step has its own logical sense. So if we are doing the one after step 2, after step 1, if we are going for step 2, we have a logical reason that it will help us in coming to a conclusion. So this step will be important. So logic is behind every step which is being put into that algorithm. This algorithm, is nothing less, it's a ladder, step ladder pattern where you go step by step and reach your destination. It has a few disadvantages. Disadvantages in the term that it is a bit of a tedious work. It needs a lot of sitting around discussions. It doesn't come overnight. You can't just decide it that one sitting and say, okay, this is fine and we can go about it. It has many failures. First algorithm may not meet our requirement. So we need to define, remodify, and do a lot of things. And before we need to reach to a desired algorithm, which meets our requirements for that particular process. So what are the characteristics of algorithm? Algorithm, first, as I told you, it needs an input. Then it has to be very definite. It defines everything clearly. It has a defined number of procedures, steps, which has to be finite, and the outcome should be there, which should be effective. So when we are having an algorithm created, all these 5 features are to be a part of that algorithm to make it successful. So if we talk about our blood donor screening, so why are we talking about algorithm in this area? We are doing, most of us, or many of us, I would rather say, are doing parallel testing with serological methods, which are mandatory testing, and everybody has to follow. It can be either ELISA, it can be chemiluminescence, it can be any other method which is acceptable. And parallelly, people are doing NAT testing. So when we do these parallel testing, there many a times we come across discordant results, the results which are not matching. So sero and NAT results may not be same. So these discordant results create confusion. To overcome this confusion and to come to a net outcome, we tend to do certain things in a steps-wise way so that we come to a final call that whether this sample is reactive or the donor has to be called or whatever. Secondly, second important aspect is the time management. We need to make sure that the unit can be released for the patients on a timely basis, and there are defined steps which help us. So if there are discordant results, or we have created an algorithm which helps us in making sure that when we give the results, these results are the final results, and whether we have to release it or don't have to release it, the algorithm helps us in doing that. Then we can also have true and false positive cases. And very importantly, may not be important because all of us discard the units, whether it's true or false. But when we do a donor notification, it is very important to identify and differentiate between the two cases so as to make them realize what the important, whether they are reactive or not. NAT and serology yields are again a point of discussion, because NAT yields and serology, when we say a yield, earlier we just a simple one-step procedure of getting something positive without going further and going into a detailed workup, whether they are true positive or they are false positive, they were declared as yields. But with an algorithm created, we are able to come to a final conclusion. And last but not the least, this algorithm which we create, it helps us in giving confidence in donor notification and effective donor counseling. So in Indian scenario, we have two methodologies for NAT screening. One is individual donor NAT and then is mini pool NAT. So in individual donor NAT testing, each sample is tested individually without mixing them. And we have one bag per sample, in which we do it. And in mini pool, we have multiple samples which are mixed together to make a pool sample. And mostly it is a pool of 6 which is being tested, and it is collected and we test it. So in ID-NAT, all the samples are individually tested for each bag, while in mini pool, the pool samples are done and only the 0 non-reactive samples are taken for NAT testing. So before we understand our donor screening, we need to understand something about the discordant results, which we keep on talking about. So if we look at the infectivity of the blood, we have this infectivity status when the donor gets infected with a virus. And then there is a period in which there is an antigen detection in the sample. We can do antigen detection by the methodology by using, and then we have antibody detection. So sometimes the antigen antibody detection period window may be overlapping. But if we look at it, the NAT detection is adding a value that it has a long window of being detectable from the time of infectivity, which shortens, as we know, it shortens the window for detection. So if we have what methodology we are using, it can be, we are not able to match it. For example, if we are using a method which has antigen detection, so it may be in the early phase, we may miss out the reaction or infection in the late phase, or vice versa for the antibody detection. So in those cases, we may have discordant results. Another thing is the viral load. So in the viral load in the various phases of the infection is variable. So it is like in discordant, there is a Poisson distribution which defines that it is a probability of detecting low viral load sample when the viral load is lower than the limit of detection. And Poisson in French means fresh fish in English. So if we look at it, if there are more fish in the pond, it's easy to catch them. And if there are very few, we may miss out even after netting for long. So this is the distribution which helps us in understand. It is just to simplify that why we may have discordant results in our different methodologies. So first I will discuss about the individual donor NAT algorithm. And regarding this, a very nice paper and data analysis has been published by Dr. Aseem Tiwari in 2017. So he has compared the algorithms between two periods, before 2012 and after 2012. So before 2012, there was nothing very specific about the algorithm. It was a simple method that if the individual donor sample was reactive on ID-NAT testing, then the sample will directly go for discriminatory testing. If it was reactive, it was defined as a discriminatory yield. It was discarded. If it was non-reactive in that discriminatory testing, it was labeled as inconclusive, though it was discarded. This was the initial algorithm. In 2012, there were a lot of meetings and discussions, and the algorithm was modified. So in this algorithm, the initial reactive sample, if sample was coming initial reactive by NAT testing, the primary tube was put to triplicate testing. And if either of that triplicate testing came positive, then the sample from the plasma bag is taken and it is again put to triplicate testing along with the discriminatory testing. So this is it. If individual sample reactive, it is called NAT initial reactive. It is then the triplicate of the primary sample tube is repeated. And if all are non-reactive in triplicate, it is non-replicating or non-repeatable reactive, and we don't need any further testing. But if either of one of the triplicate is showing repeat reactive status, then the plasma bag sample is taken for triplicate and for discriminatory testing. If in this there is reactive for either of the markers, it is discriminatory yield. If it is non-reactive, then it is non-discriminatory yield. So this is the modified one, and the modified algorithm helped the people who are doing IDNAT to identify and to lessen out the number of false positives in case of NAT testing, and which Dr. Asim has also published in his paper. So looking at the whole overall scenario for the testing for IDNAT, if we look at the whole scene, we have 4 scenarios. First scenario is seronegative, NAT non-reactive, negative. So actually nothing to be done. It is a concordant finding. So there is no further workup is required. Second scenario is it is seronegative and non-NAT initial reactive. So as I told you further earlier, so if that is the case, the primary tube sample is put for triplicate testing, and if either of the case comes reactive again, the plasma bag sample is taken for triplicate testing again plus discriminatory testing, and then defined accordingly. If positive, then discriminatory NAT yield. If not reactive, it is non-discriminatory yield, and the result is almost inconclusive. Then the third scenario is the seropositive but NAT non-reactive. In that case, the blood bank will repeat the serology testing. If it is a positive again and the NAT is not reactive, then it is a potential zero yield. But if the sample is non-reactive, then it was a false positive case. The fourth scenario is seropositive NAT initial reactive. So in this case, again, the sample tube is repeated for testing along with the discriminatory. And if it is concordant positive, it is discriminated for scenario. If it is not, then it is non-discriminated. So this scenario is for the initial, individual donor NAT testing, where all the 4 scenarios of the discordant and the concordant status are worked up. And these steps are very clearly defined. Every center who is doing IDNAT is following it because it is done by the company people. They have set up a protocol and they're sharing it with each of the users. Then we come to the second method of doing NAT, which is a mini pool NAT. In this, the algorithm is very simple, and I have taken it from the users who are using mini pool. So the thing is, they do all donor sample by routine serology. If it is serology is reactive for either the sample, it is sorted out. They are not going to put it for NAT. Only serology non-reactive samples are taken up for NAT testing, and they are done in the pool of 6. So, and the master pool is prepared from these samples and they are put for testing. Then if there is any pool which is coming to be positive, so for that pool, they have to do a resolution. And in that case, they have this, they all test all the samples separately, each of them, to identify the sample which was reactive. And then they do a real-time discrimination and identification for pool resolution. So in that case, So if mini-pool donor NAT has one or more individual sample from pool, which is coming out to be reactive, then the complete, they call complete reactive. So basically, complete reactive is if one or more individual, whichever sample is coming out to be reactive, and if remaining samples are reported as complete non-reactive. For further viral resolution, if none of the donor tests reactive, then the final result of each target is determined. And if all targets are non-reactive, the sample tests are non-reactive. This is the algorithm for their resolution, which I have taken and Dr. Rasika has shared with me. So I have taken from the people who are using this mini-pool NAT. So correct me if I'm wrong or if I have missed out on something in that aspect, please, I'm open to that. But I think that's all for the NAT algorithm. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sangeeta. It was nicely dealt with the algorithm and what are the characteristic and importance. And I have used both mini-pool and IDNet, and you are very correct. You have not interpreted wrongly for mini-pool. Yes, if something comes positive, then individual testing of all tests are being done.
Yeah.
So this is all. Now over to you, Dr. Sangeeta Pathak. You are mute, Dr. Sangeeta.
That's it. Sorry. So thank you, Sangeeta, for that very nice talk. I just wanted to add one thing, that in the mini pool, the means good part of the mini pool discrimination and resolution is that you get the results then and there. By evening, you get all the results. Hello, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we'll switch on to the next topic.
No, that's why, Dr. Sangeeta, I said it is a real-time resolution which is happening. That
exactly.
That's what I
PCR. You can say real-time PCR as well. That's
exactly.
So we'll call upon the second speaker for today, and that's Dr. Rajesh Sawant. He'll be speaking on quality assurance in NAT testing lab. And Rajesh is working right now with Kokilaben Hospital as the in charge and the HOD for the blood bank. And he's delivered many talks, and we all know him so well. So over to you, Rajesh, because I suppose I need to look at the time also so that we stick to the time. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Hello, are my slides visible?
Yes.
Yes, sir. I would request you to please put them on the screen, slideshow mode.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Sangeeta, and thank you, organizers, for giving me this opportunity to, be a part of this CME program and share my experience. So I'll be talking about quality assurance in the NAT laboratory testing. But before that, just a brief data sharing. I'll just skip the basic introduction, etc., and directly come to our experience with NAT. So at Kokilaben Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital, we have implemented NAT testing since March 2012. And I can directly come to the results here. So this is just to keep up with the theme of today's CME program. So total till date, the number of units that were screened are 76,224, of which 1.4% were reactive. Now, if you look at the bifurcation of the reactive samples, 5.7 were NAT initial reactive, 46.7% were concordant yields, 40% were zero yields, and 6.8% were the actual NAT yields. Now, out of these actual NAT yields, there were again 21 out of 73 which did not actually could not be discriminated in the discriminatory run. So these were indeterminate NAT yields. So I think Dr. Sangeeta Agarwal has made my task easy because all these terminologies were also covered in her talk. So, and if you look at the NAT yield also, we have 51 HBV NAT yields and 1 HCV, none for HIV. So HBV is the major challenge, the major problem as far as blood safety is concerned. So for all these HBV NAT yields, we do the HBV profile, which includes the anti-HBC IgG, anti-HBC IgM, anti-HBS, and anti-HBE. And based on the results of these profiles, you can categorize the patient, or rather the donor, as one with chronic infection or immunization, initial phase of infection or resolved acute infection, or whether the individual is susceptible or not. So this is just a breakup of the results of the HBV profile. So this was just to share the outline of our experience with the ID-NAT testing. So based on this data, the probability of NAT yield in our donor population that we have dealt with over these years is 1 per 1,044 donors tested, and the risk of TTI transmission by only serology testing, if we were to do away with NAT, then currently in this particular donor, with this particular donor population, the risk of TTI transmissibility comes to about 1 in every 3,132 components that are issued or transfused. So with that, let us come to the topic, that is quality assurance. So as Dr. Sangeeta Agarwal has also shared with us, that there are various platforms that are available, a semi-automated ESAS platform for ID-NAT, there is an automated Panther platform, and for the mini-pool testing, we have the Cobas S201 system as well. So, but all these are basically molecular diagnostic tests. So there are certain do's and don'ts that we need to look at when it comes to quality assurance, or maintaining the quality of testing and results in all the 3 phases of testing, the pre-analytical, analytical, as well as the post-analytical. So I'll try to touch upon these, but also keep in pace with the time that is allocated. So the first and foremost is proper decontamination. So it depends on whether you are sincerely preparing your bleach every day or not, and you are using the right concentration of the bleach, etc. And it's not only cleaning with the sodium hypochlorite, but the time that is allowed for contact with sodium hypochlorite, at least 15 minutes should be allowed after using sodium hypochlorite before you actually again clean the entire area with deionized or sterile water. Similarly, when it comes to reagent preparation, warm all the reagents, bring them to room temperature, mix them thoroughly, and only then you start your testing. Similarly, next point would be about alicotting the reagent. So it is always advisable to remove the reagents from the refrigerator or the freezer 60 minutes prior to testing, thaw those reagents manually by gentle inverting the vials, and then alicot the required amount of reagents in the preparation tubes for testing for the day. When it comes to sample preparation, again, it's very, very important that the specimen should be separated as early as possible and no later than 72 hours of the collection of that blood specimen. Calibrators, again, are single-use vials, so please do not try and use them on multiple occasions. Word of caution is about certain reagents that are light sensitive, especially the probe reagents are light sensitive, and therefore their storage has to be done properly in dark. Proper vortexing is also very, very important, because we have to see to it that the contents of the tubes are well mixed when we look at the testing or the reactions. Also, when you start the vortexer, it's very important to start at a low speed, a low level, and then gradually increase it to the desired result. So here we have to take care that the contents, they should mix properly, but at the same time, they should not be touching the surface of the sealing cards. That's also very, very important. Again, pipetting, I think it goes without saying that it's absolutely very important the way you pipette the reagents, the sample, and whether you're, while pipetting, the pipette should not touch the sides or the rim of the tube, or the way in which the samples are pipetted. There should be no splashing of reagents, etc. Very, very important. Again, disposal of reagents has to be done properly. and you have to again clean and disinfect all the work surfaces essentially before starting the test as well as at the end of the test. So generally before starting it is done, but sometimes, you know, when we audit our laboratories, we find that at the end of the testing, the technologist may not do the disinfection. So that's again very, very important. Do not refreeze, avoid cross contamination of specimens, or else we are, you know, bound to get false positive results. Again, avoid cross contamination by pipetting. This is again very important because many a times every utmost care is taken, but a simple step like while discarding the used pipettes, you pass over those used pipettes or the tip over the other open tubes, and there is a possibility that there might be contamination of the pipette tip content into these open tubes. So you have to be careful about these locations. Do not pipette by mouth, no eating or drinking or smoking in the designated area. I think this also is a universal precaution. Avoid contact of reagents. So wear proper personal protective equipment. So no reagent should touch your skin or eyes or any of the mucous membranes of the body. Do not use the kit beyond its expiry date. Very, very important again. Avoid microbial and ribonucleus contamination of the reagents. So way in which you store the kits and the tips is very, very important. Do not reuse the sealing cards. Again, very important. We see sometimes that, technologists may reuse those cards, not understanding that this might lead to cross contamination, invalid results, etc. If there is any precipitate or cloudiness, do not accept the reagent for testing. Do not combine any assay reagents or fluids without any specific instructions. So these are the general requirements of any molecular testing. So basically, if you look at the most important aspects, specific precautions need to be taken while handling reagents. Second is organization of your workspace and the way you keep your equipments. Third is specific use and cleaning advice for the designated areas. Then the general precautions or universal precautions. And last but not the least, the aspects related to internal controls. So coming to reagent related aspects, it's very important to just give a brief centrifuge to the reagent tubes before opening them so that we avoid the generation of aerosols. Again, alicotting the reagents, we've already talked about it. Label the reagents and your aliquots properly with the content, the name of the reagent, the date, etc. And maintain a log of these reagent lots and batch numbers, etc. Then pipette all the reagents and samples using filter tips. That's recommended highly. As far as the organization of the workspace and equipment is concerned, the flow of work is very, very important, a unidirectional flow. So towards the end, I will show certain pictures of these do's and don'ts where it will be very obvious, but I'm sure all of us know that the unidirectional flow is from the pre-PCR to the post-PCR. So post-PCR to pre-PCR should not be allowed or should not be possible. Again, having physically separate designated areas for the most important steps. If it is not possible to have 4 different rooms, but at least you can do these activities under a separate laminar airflow bench, and that also should suffice. So separate set of clearly labeled equipments like pipettes, filter tapes, tube racks, vortexes, centrifuges. So these should not be shared. It should be dedicated to that particular area, the pre-amp or the post-amp area. Of course, good hand washing, proper gloves and powder-free gloves, use of lab coats, which are restricted to use in that particular area, are the general principles that we have to take care of. And of course, we've talked about sodium hypochlorite and decontamination. So these are the most important aspects. Now, at times, there are labs who do not use sodium hypochlorite for various reasons or regulatory reasons. If you're using 70% ethanol, then it's very essential to see to it that there is a facility of UV light that is available to complete the decontamination process. Otherwise, just using ethanol without UV light may not lead to a complete decontamination. So please bear that in mind. And another word of caution here is that vortexer or centrifuge should not be cleaned with sodium hypochlorite. Instead, you can use 70% ethanol and exposure to UV light for the decontamination of these two equipments. Again, pipettes are best autoclaved. So if you can sterilize them by autoclaving, if the manufacturer's instructions permit so, definitely that would be the best, because if you use sodium hypochlorite, then again there is a possibility of corrosion of various parts of the pipettes. Of course, for all of us, it's a routine requirement that all equipments need to be calibrated. There need to be a designated technical person who is in charge of all the calibration schedule. Service labels should be proper and clearly displayed on the equipments, etc. So these are the general aspects. Few more general precautions would include using powder-free gloves, but this is general. But many times we've seen that, in the haste of work, people do not pay attention to whether these are powder-free or these are not powder-free. So they have to take care of that. Pipetting techniques, very, very important, and that's why I thought that we should also highlight some important sites where there are good training material, including videos that are available. So Gilson Guide to Pipetting and Anachem Pipetting Technique videos are recommended in this case. Again, simple things like how you centrifuge your tubes before opening and open them very carefully to avoid any splashing. Close the tubes immediately after you are done with the aspiration of the sample, etc. Protect reagent, especially with fluorescent probes, from light to avoid their degradation. So these are general precautions which are necessary in our NAT testing laboratory. After that, the most important would be having a good quality assurance framework. So this quality assurance framework or plan should include list of reagent master stocks and working stocks. Rules for storing kits and reagents should be known to everyone who is involved in the testing. How to report the control results, the training program for the staff who is involved in the testing, various algorithms for troubleshooting, like we saw the NAT testing algorithm also. So if something is initial reactive, you just don't directly label it as initial reactive, but you run it again the next day in a next run from the bag as well as from the tube or from the plasma bag, etc. And what are the various remedial actions whenever there is any troubleshooting that is needed. So this would be the basic framework of the quality assurance plan. So these very rapidly, I have covered the most important points. Now let us go and recap all these points in the form of pictures. So here you can see 3 different rooms, that is the changing room, the pre-amplification and the post-amplification room for NAT testing. Of course, your NAT lab has to be restricted entry. Do not allow visitors when the testing is going on. And even later when you allow them, they have to have complete PPE on. Certain other important things is like use of shoe covers, face mask, gloves, apron, etc. Do not bring e-tables. Do not use your mobile phones there. Handle all the equipments and reagents as per the SOP, and consider all the specimen as infectious. So universal precautions. Again, unidirectional workflow. So you have the ante room from where you can move to the pre-amp room and then to the post-amp room, but not again to the pre-amp room. So unidirectional flow has to be maintained. Environment, very, very important. It is different specifications. In the pre-amp room, you need a temperature of 15 to 30 degrees Celsius, humidity of 30 to 80%, and a air pressure that is positive to the post-amp area. Whereas for the post-amp room, the requirement of temperature is a little different, 21 to 27 degrees Celsius, humidity 10 to 80%, and air pressure should be negative to the adjacent area of the NAT lab. So this has to be taken care of while designing your NAT laboratory. Again, decontamination we've talked about, use 0.5% sodium hypochlorite, wait for 15 minutes, very, very important. And then again, use deionized water to remove that bleach, right? Again, whole blood, the tubes, the pilot tube should be stored at 25 degrees Celsius, not more than 72 hours. So if you have major big camps, mega collections, etc., you have to plan at least 2 batches per day so that you complete your testing within the stipulated time period. And it is always a good idea to store the plasma in a frozen manner. Again, contamination control is very, very important. PPE is a must. There should be protective gears for the operators. Do not reuse any of the TTUs or TTCs or tips. It's very, again, it's a mandatory rule over there. All consumables should be for one-time use only, and change the gloves every time you touch the sample, or whenever you are not sure whether you have touched anything or not. It's better that you change the gloves instead of landing up with an invalid test result at the end of the run, right? Then again, the way in which you dispose of the biomedical waste is very, very important. Avoid cluttering of reagents and samples, etc. together. Have separate areas for these, separate work areas, separate workbenches. Only uncap one bottle or a vial at a time. Do not leave everything open. That's a high possibility for contamination to occur again. Follow your hospital infection control norms. Very important. You can't have a technologist working without a cap and open hair, right? That is again bound to contamination bound to happen. Then reagent vials should never be thrown out uncapped, or disposing of unused reagents in a biobin or waste receptacle is a high risk behavior, and it can lead to again various contaminations in your NAT run. Again, the way in which the biomedical waste disposal happens is very, very important. So please segregate the waste and work very cautiously as far as waste is concerned. Again, mobile phones, total no, not acceptable at all while working into your NAT laboratory. And last but very important is your documentation. So documentation of the daily assay run records, reactive test details, daily QC checklists, daily, weekly, and monthly maintenance records, updated SOPs, emergency contact numbers, and any contact numbers of the technical assistants. All these should be there present within your reach in the laboratory and not located remotely elsewhere. So these are, I thought, most important points which are going to affect the quality of the results and rather the invalid test results when you are dealing with the NAT testing. So that's it. I think what I wanted to share with all of you as far as quality assurance is concerned. Thank you once again for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh, for sabse pehle to finish it in time, and secondly for such a beautiful journey of this quality assurance in the NAT lab, because we miss it in details at times. We do not look at it, and this was really good that you took us through. Thank you so much for that. And now over to Rasika for taking up.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sangeeta. And I would like to thank the speakers for keeping well in time. And now we are in for the much awaited session, the quiz time with the quiz master. So our quiz master, again, for today needs no introduction, Dr. Aikaj Jindal. He is somebody who doesn't know about him. He's probably not a part of the transfusion fraternity. He's working as the head in the Department of Immunohematology and Blood Transfusion at SSP Hospital, Ludhiana. He's a principal investigator was a principal investigator for the ICMR Placid trial for convalescent plasma, is a working member of the Australian Asian COVID trial group, co-convener and special interest group for ISTM for therapeutic apheresis, coordinator for Atom Cellular Therapy Group, special interest in PBSC extraction and cellular therapy, national quiz master for postgraduate immunohematology and blood transfusion quiz, guest faculty at national and international conferences, author for various publications of index journals. He's been awarded the Travel Fellowship Grant 2017 for Department of Transplant Infectious Disease, CMC Vellore, and ICMR Institute of Epidemiology and Basic Course in Biomedical Research. Dr. Aikaj would also be moderating the panel discussion. So over to Dr. Aikach.
Thank you, ma'am, for such a kind and superfluous introduction. Thank you so much. I would take few minutes to just introduce the quiz contest. The quiz will happen on your screens. You have to just click on the right answer and then submit in the end. Please don't forget to submit the quiz. If you do not submit, the answers will not be recorded. So without much further ado, I'll launch the quiz now. The quiz shall be on your screens now. You'll be given 30 seconds per question. That will be 2 minutes. Human herpes virus, HHV8, is associated with which leukocyte? Granulocyte, T lymphocyte, B lymphocyte, monocyte. You have 10 more seconds to answer this question. Before we move on to the next, I'll read out the next later. You can move on to the next. That is not an issue. Next question. The most common transfusion transmitted infection is hepatitis B. Is it Yersinia enteropolitica, coagulase negative staphylococcus, methicillin resistant staphylococcus aureus, that is MRSA? Question number 3. For those who thought names ended in class 10 history, who coined the term transfusion microbiology? Fiona Regan, Marcela Contreras, John Barbera, Faye Fisher. The last question, even I get it wrong many times. The third generation of anti-HCV immunoassay contains following antigens: core, NS3, NS4, NS5, or core with NS3, NS4 only, or is it just core and NS3, or it's just core and nothing else? You have 15 more seconds to answer. We have already received 17 people who have answered it fully. 10 seconds more. 5, 4, 3, 2, and that's a wrap. The winners shall be informed later from this webinar. Now, coming back to the panel, I am really surprised that for the first time ever, we have maintained the time slots. I can see the chairpersons, Dr. Sadhana and Dr. Sangeeta, must be very happy.
Yes.
First time ever, we are maintaining time.
That's true. We are well in time. Good. Akaj, before you start the panel discussion, and yes, I would just like to announce the name, which probably Dr. Sangeeta missed it in her introductory welcome speech. The October month's quiz winner is Dr. Satyam Arora. And the award money has been transferred to him. So congratulations, Dr. Satyam, for giving the quickest answer.
I'm sorry that I forgot it. I'm sorry that I forgot.
It's okay. It's okay. I thought let the boost be there to others. Let the boost be others. Over to you, Akaj.
Thank you, ma'am. So, in this era of blood safety for NAT and beyond, we thank our partners at Grifols with their Proclex Panther system, who have sponsored this part of the panel discussion. But I must say, at Atom, we believe in neutrality. The panel will have 2 people who are using Minipool NAT and 2 people who are using IP NAT from Grifols. So I think a balanced panel is what we are going to put forward. Let me introduce the first panelist for this session, Dr. Sudha Ranganathan. Ma'am is consultant in head transfusion medicine, Apollo Hospital, Hyderabad, and is using NAT. Next in the panel is Dr. Subhashish Das. I would request Dr. Subhashish Das to please unmute himself. Sir is Professor of Pathology at Sri Devraj Urs Medical College, Kolar. Dr. Das is using ID-NAT in his blood bank. Dr. Amit Agarwal. Sir is Senior Consultant, Fortis Escorts Heart Institute, Delhi. Sir is not using the ID-NAT. I think he's using it for testing other centers also. He is getting the samples from all over India, I must say, and testing it for them. And last but not the least, Dr. Apra Kalra. Ma'am is Additional Director in Head Transfusion Medicine, Fortis Hospital, Mohali, Punjab. Ma'am is using Minipool NAT from Roche. So with this,
Dr. Ekaj, I would like to correct here. We have started using ID-NAT since the last 3 months.
wonderful. So now you have just tipped the balance on the other side. Wonderful. So now I'll ask the first question to Dr. Sudha Ranganathan, ma'am. What are the main challenges in universal NAT implementation for blood products?
Yeah, hello, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Dr.
Yeah.
Sudha, you are.
Okay, so thank you for giving me this opportunity. So let me take you to the through the challenges which I personally faced when we started thinking about NAT. The first and foremost was to convince ourselves whether this costly, expensive test is really required, particularly when this was not mandatory some 12 or 13 years ago. Still, it is not mandatory. So that was very important for us, because blood safety has a lot of variables, as you know, and transfusion associated infections is just one part of the blood safety component. So in that, we are already doing screening with serology for the viral testing. And whether NAT would add value to this blood safety was a big question mark. But when you read things, when you see your peers doing it, research publications about the window period transmission, then we thought yes. So that was the most challenging part for the decision to actually implement NAT in our blood center. Then after we got convinced, then convincing about the cost effectiveness of the same was a huge task, running up to the administrators and telling them about this importance of this implementation in our blood center. Then after that, again, the space constraints. As you know, blood bank is given only the mandatory 500 square meters to function. So if you want to have an additional testing to be done, you need additional space. You cannot put the equipment in the already designated space that is there. So if you are lucky, then if you have extra space, then you can put it in the blood bank itself. But then if you are restricted towards the mandatory space that is given to you, you need to select another space. Then again, this is a big challenge, transporting the samples, because they could get contaminated during the transport. So that was another big challenge we faced while implementation. Then again, training and the technology itself. Like you saw, there are two technologies. When NAT came some 15 years ago with a big bang to India, there were two different technologies. There are still two different techniques, of course. Which one to select was a big challenge. So that required a lot of, again, reading and certain things, what you could, fit in your situation, what is required to your particular blood bank. That was a big challenge again. Then training aspects for the technicians. because it is important, they know about the contamination. They should know, like Rajesh showed you, so many aspects of the technical aspects which are involved, particularly when there is a lot of manual intervention that is required in the process. That is extremely important for us to train the technicians about the do's and the don'ts during the process of NAT testing. So that is again a huge challenge. These are the few challenges which actually we faced during the universal NAT implementation in our blood center. But what still bothers me even after so many years is, do I call the donor and tell him he's NAT positive, even though he's hepatitis B negative? In fact, I want answers from different people over here, because again, as you know, he's hepatitis B negative. If he donates in the blood bank next to us, he will be, his blood will be considered safe and fit for blood transfusion. Whereas if he donates in ours, NAT positive, then we discard them. So we don't know what to tell the donor. That is a big challenge, which is again, bothering me even now. So these are the answers for this question, Akej. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. You've raised some pretty relevant and valid issues like space, like cost, and technical expertise. Also, when you have taken this step forward and you have gone ahead with the NAT, but the people who are in your city, they are still doing with ELISA, or in some cases, Chemi, or even Rapid. And the tests don't corroborate what you have just tested. So you're very right. It is a challenge for the donor also for donor notification, because the donor can quickly, rebut your, remark of being NAT positive for a disease. This question will be taken, a very valid question will be taken after the discussion of this. But the very valid questions raised by ma'am, the challenges that were faced, leads us to the second part of the question for Dr. Amit Agarwal, sir. So, sir, as ma'am said, the challenges that hamper universal NAT implementations are the space, the cost, and the technological expertise. You have been running one of the most successful hub and spoke model of NAT testing. So my question to you is this the future of NAT testing in India or any developing nation?
Yeah, thanks for the invite. I would say the questions that has been raised by Dr. Sudha Ranganathan, the answer to all of these is hub and spoke model only. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, loud and clear. Sorry, sir, you have just muted yourself.
Years. Till date, we have run almost 5 lakh samples at our center. Centralized blood banking testing is based on hub and spoke model, is the present of also. The reason behind this is cost effectiveness. There is no investment, easy to implement. It is very easy to convince the management, because you are supposed to pay based on the test runs only. No space is required, no logistics, no control expenses, no maintenance, no space, and you don't need to have full-time staff, trained staff, or any other investment. So the answer to all these queries that has been raised is the only centralized blood bank testing based on the hub and spoke model.
So a small follow-up question to this is already, as Dr. Ranganathan already mentioned, what happens to the chances of contamination during transportation? I'm sure you're getting samples from distant places. How do you ensure that there's no contamination, all the samples are viable till they reach you?
Samples, the thing is that as such at our center, this has been maintained and run by the company person only. They have tie up with their logistics. Their staffs does it a packing very well, and then they are transported in the coolant. So there is no contamination, no hemolysis of the sample that has been reported till date as of now. Once the sample received, it has been run well on time, and then the report that has been dispatched through the internet, through the emails and everything. Hard copies they need to be sent later on.
Wonderful, sir.
Point that I want to add, this centralized blood bank testing is the best part is you can easily switch over
Okay.
from one technology to two technology. Like 2 persons, Dr. Apra like just told us like she has switched over. Dr. Sadhana Mangwana also has switched over. So I would say the best part of this centralized testing is you can switch over if there is any issues with your company, whatever you are using, whatever the platform. And the good part is now both the competitors, like maybe.
So you're muted again.
They are having the same technology based on this.
So please continue, sir.
They are using centralized testing for both the platforms. Now it has been available.
So can I say you are converting one blood bank one by one, each blood bank, huh?
Can I add something?
Please go ahead, ma'am.
There's one comment for Dr.
We are
Sudha.
looking
What
at-
she added that there are two technologies, IDNet and Minipool, which is well known to all. But now the third player has also come into the market on PCR technology only by MyLabs. So this is what my input for all the audience. Over to you, Akash, to continue.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. A wonderful clarification by Dr. Amit Agarwal regarding that. Yes, indeed, we are looking at a future where we might think of centralizing the NAT testing to decrease the cost and increase the availability to places who cannot afford their own NAT testing. My next question goes to Dr. Subhashish Das. So my question,
Good afternoon, sir.
how do you make the decision, IDNAT versus MPNAT? Where do you draw the line? What influences your decision? Is it just the cost? Is it just the ease of performing the test? Or what else happens in the decision-making process?
So thanks very much, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for this question, sir. This is a very important question. We have recently started IDNAT. So for us to come to this kind of a conclusion, we also had to ponder a lot over these issues before we finally took a call regarding IDNAT. So what has prompted us really to go for the IDNAT was the previous experiences of other blood banks. As we have just now seen, many of our blood banks initially started with pool NAT and then they switched over to IDNAT. And we thought that even by the previous experience, what other blood banks had, it would be good for us that we need not experiment too much. And we went off for the IDNAT straight away, going by the experiences of other blood banks. So that was which ultimately, tilted the balance towards IDNAT. And moreover, we saw the literature was always tilted in favor of IDNAT. So we thought it would be a good option to go for an IDNAT, sir.
So thank you, Dr. Subhashish, for answering it. So as you rightly said, maybe the literature is also tilted for it.
Yes.
How do you answer if somebody asks regarding the cost part?
So cost, so we, as you just now said, the hub and spoke model we opted because
Okay.
we get the Kolar district, all the blood samples to our blood bank for testing. And after the testing, the reports are dispatched via email. So in that way, because the pooling of resources has helped us to cut down the cost. And we have approached some organizations, Lions Blood Bank and Rotary Blood Bank, to help us out to subsidize to some extent if possible. So that the management has taken a call that yes, these things needs to be subsidized. And I'm thankful to our college management who came forward for this innovative idea of, giving up some financial subsidies to cover the cost.
Thank you, Dr. Das, for this
Thank you, sir.
explanatory answer. My next question is to Dr. Apra Kalra, ma'am. So NAT testing, as we all know, conventionally, it is being used for whole blood donations. And in some centers, they have tried doing it and maintaining the supply chain, in demand and supply chain for that matter, for SDP donors also. So do you think in our setup, in a developing country and in our country, which has SDPs and dengue season and all, is it a dream which can be achieved?
So, good afternoon.
If we consider apheresis, universal NAT testing for apheresis, yes, it will definitely help us with lowering the critical window period and in diagnosing the occult HPV infections. But before implementation, there are two major factors which need to be taken into consideration. First is the turnaround time. See, I've used around, for 8 years, I've used Minipool NATs. Now, since the last 3 months, I'm using ID NAT. But for both, the run time is approximately 4 hours. So if we have that much of time in hand, only then we can consider going in for a NAT testing for the apheresis donors. And if we consider random access sampling in both these, so then the cost would be very high, because we have to run controls with each run, whether it is ID or it is Minipool. The controls need to be run in each run, so which further adds to the cost. And second factor that needs to be considered again is the cost. Even if we can charge, but for apheresis, since there is a capping on the total cost of the apheresis, so we just need to think about whether we are able to afford, with our limited resources in a country like India, where so many blood banks are still doing rapid testing. So the cost of the test plus the cost of the controls which have to be run with each test. So that needs to be taken into consideration. So even then, we cannot say that it should not be done. Yes, it will definitely add value. But I think my personal view is, before implementing NAT testing, we should go in for a better serological method testing for TTIs, and a stringent donor screening that will help, and voluntary non-remunerated repeat donors should be encouraged for apheresis.
I echo your thoughts about this, that yes, before, blindly advocating NAT 100%, we could improve LJ charting in our blood banks. We could ensure that the screening of the donors is done in a better way. I would request our chairpersons if they could join in for a comment. Dr. Sangeeta Pathak ma'am, Dr. Sadhana Mangwana ma'am.
Yes, definitely. This is the actually need of our, that the better screening.
I agree with Apra. What was that, Dr. Sadhana? No, I'm not mute. I'm not mute. Actually, I'm sitting at some place, so I didn't want to remove my mask. Anyways, I just agree with Apra that she said, first we have to improve our serology testing. That is so important. You are doing a NAT and you are doing a very third, fourth generation, not even fourth, third generation ELISA. What is the point of doing a NAT? Itna acha aapka, too much of yield from a NAT doesn't speak good about you. So I agree to that. And rest techniques, I always say go for NAT, any of the techniques. I don't mind using a ID, I don't mind using a Minipool, but at least you should assure that your patients get a NAT tested blood. That is very, very important to all of us. It's not which type of NAT you're using. It should be a NAT being used at your facility. That is actually very, very important. And that is what I always reverberate, that we should use NAT. And rest means there are other methods that are coming up. And those methods also have been validated by people and are being run and are being used. But again, as to your wiseness and as to your needs, choose whatever you feel is best amongst yourselves and do the best with, and means we have got an opportunity to at least reduce the window period. We are not saying zero window period, we are not reaching, but at least some reductions in window periods are being achieved by any of the NATs. So go for NAT, do NAT testing and assure some amount of better safety for your patients, as well as some amount of cover for yourselves, as well as working as transfusion medicine specialists, because in the court of law, you would be asked, were some better tests available? And if you say yes, and you didn't do it, then you had it. So just to to cover yourself, also, please do use NAT. Over to Dr. Sadhana for her comments.
Yes, I agree with everyone that one must really use a NAT, whatsoever the facility their center or institute can opt for, depending on their own criteria or the challenges. And as Dr. Sangeeta has rightly said, that still we are having a very high NAT yield. What Dr. Savan said, that their NAT yield was 1 in 1014, and in our study, it was 1 in 974. So, but while the Western and European country or even the US, NAT yield is very, very low. So then screening, good screening, good testing is the need of our, of course, to add on with the NAT testing. So we have to convince our managements that we must add for improved serology testing and, if possible, NAT testing. So if the centers which are not doing the any ELISA or ECI, still they are on the rapid card, then they have to really convince for their administration or higher ups that at least they should go for the 4th generation testing, though it is being mandated by the FDA that the 3rd and 4th generation ELISA are must. But at the same time, there are many centers across India which are still on the rapid card or not doing the good serology testing. So that is the need of our, first of all, so that we can not transmit the TTIs, infections to the patient, and we should really improve the blood safety. Over to you, Ekaj.
Thank you, ma'am. We can see a hand raised by Dr. Navjyoti Chaudhary, sir.
He's joined.
I would request you to please unmute yourself and share the point that you want to make.
Navjot, sir.
Sir has raised his hand. So I think while he takes time to unmute himself, there's a question in the chat. That question is for Dr. Amit, sir. The question is, in centralized testing, the results are shared by email. How do you share the reactive results? By email itself, or do you have a physical sharing? I mean, a hard copy is shared.
Hard copy is also shared later on, and physically, and mails reports are sent by email the same day.
So both the things are done. Initially, it is by email, and physical signed reports are also sent over to the hubs that you are serving to.
Yes.
Can I?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
I have used both Minipool as well as IDNet, and both on hub and spoke model. And in both the methodology, it all depends on the vendors and their logistics. Normally, in I would say 99% cases, the arrangements are made that reports are emailed or informed to the sending center, and then later on, by the end of the day or at the most next day, hard copy signed, duly signed by the center in charge who's performing the NAT test are being delivered. So this is a normal methodology being used across all, whosoever the vendor is, whether the Minipool or the IDNet, so that they have to really take care of such modalities to be a successful hub and spoke model.
Thank you, ma'am. We now go on to Dr. Navjyoti Chaudhary, sir, for his valuable comment.
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon to everybody. It was very, very knowledgeable lectures by all the speakers, as well as good participation. I just raised my hand to give a recent recommendations of the Government of India, that Ministry of Health. All of you know that there is no longer the NBTC exist or SBTC exist, and it is actually in the DGHS. And latest recommendation that NAT should be implemented in phased manner, So that is the recommendation of the Government of India, and it will be probably in the process. However, that's why it is diplomatically says that it should be on phased manner because of the cost. That is the only one point I wanted to add. However, before I just close down, once we go from this seminar, and for last almost 20 years, because this first NAT came in India in 2002 or 3, it is almost 18, 19 years. This is a scientific forum. There are some comments by some of the speakers about some of this, technology. So as a scientific community, it is the management decision. It is the technological decision by this, technical experts. So any technology, almost 2-3 speakers have already said that any technology you do good for your patient. That's all. Which technology, it is your decision. We do not want to discuss technology in this forum. Thank you very much, ICAS, as well as chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for those valuable comments. There's another question in the chat box that if all units, I believe this question is directed to Dr. Apra ma'am, if all units are not tested by NAT, example SDP, how is the consent taken for transfusion? That is it mentioned and consent taken that some units are not NAT tested?
Yes, we do take a consent. We have a consent form for issuance of non-NAT tested blood, and we do take that consent for SDP.
Right. So,
and that consent form is signed by the patient or the patient attendant as well as the consultant, because we inform both of them beforehand that this product will not be NAT tested.
Right. So this question is open for all the other panelists also, and also the chairpersons. If in case of emergency, as everybody mentioned, there's a factor of turnaround time involved. Yes. If in emergency, you have to issue a blood which is non-NAT tested, is there a recommendation or a necessity to take the consent that yes, this blood will be non-NAT tested? Dr. Sangeeta ma'am. You are muted.
So in this case, we have an SOP with us, which says that we have a fully NAT tested blood with us, but in case that we need to issue a non-NAT tested blood, like if an RDPC is to be issued, and in dengue times, or if there is some emergency, I have a liver unit running with me along. So if in an emergency, I have to issue an RDPC. So we have an SOP which says, how would you issue a non-NAT tested blood also? So we do not take any consents from the patient. We have an SOP in place saying that, like the SDPC, yes, we do not do a NAT. There's no point in giving out an SDPC and then going for a NAT test and then have jitters that, oh my God, it has come positive. So we do not do that. And we in such the other cases also, we do not take any consents. There's an SOP in place of giving a tested NAT tested blood or a non-NAT tested blood. That's it. We do not take any consents.
Right, ma'am. A small follow-up question to this, that if, let's say, an RDP is gone without NAT testing, do you still send the sample for NAT testing for TRBC and FFP?
No, we do not. And as per the Delhi, means because I'm based in Delhi, so as per the SBTC, means we have a norm here in Delhi, and either you have to do a NAT test or a 4th generation test. Okay. So if if chemiluminescence is not allowing me to do a 4th generation, then I am putting the 2 4th generations on the RDPC that I'm issuing. I am doing that.
Thank you for
but
clarifying.
I am not keeping any sample for NAT testing later on. I do not want to have a sleepless night on. It has come positive and I have issued it to the patient. So I do not do that. I will not retest it for NAT once issued.
Wonderful, ma'am. It's a very crystal clear guidelines. I think it will help many of the people who suffer with long turnaround times. Yes, ma'am. Yes, please, ma'am. Go ahead.
The same what Dr. Sangeeta was mentioning, in our hospital also, in case of say cardiac emergency, and we don't have that inventory mainly for the platelets. Such situations appear mainly for the RDPs. That RDPs are not that very moment are NAT tested. So we talk to the CTVS people or our consultants, and they are after consultation they are okay with the ECI tested, because they always say that earlier also we were using non-NAT tested, so we are okay in this emergency. And only thing is that we write on the compatibility, it's a non-NAT tested. Simple. And also we have the policy in place, SOP in place, that in case of life-threatening emergencies, we will issue non-NAT tested component. because we are on the 100% component.
Small follow-up question for this, ma'am. When many people would want to follow this model also. So if you consult with a user physician and you tell them that yes, NAT is not available and they agree to it, do you document this conversation anywhere?
No. Only on the compatibility, whatever the compatibility report we issue, on that only we write it. But no documentation as such on the requisition or anywhere.
Right, right, ma'am.
That itself is a documentation.
Right. So as there are no more questions in the chat, I would still encourage all the participants that if you have a question, we have the most eminent speakers and panelists and chairpersons with us. People would pay money to get consultations from them. They are available here. Please write your questions. I'll ask them for you. If you want to,
or you can unmute them if they raise the hand.
That is what I was going to say. You have also have an opportunity to unmute yourself and ask your question, ask your heart out, because I don't know how this is the first time ever we have maintained time and we still have 10 minutes to spare.
And for the open house discussion.
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Sangeeta ma'am wants to make a comment.
So one comment I would like to make here. As Apra said just now, Apra had said, कि वो आपको you have to put controls with every test, with whether it's ID, whether it's mini pool, and the testing cost increases. You have to be smart enough when you're doing a deal with your. It is cost means the thing is done in the manner that every reportable test is charged, not beyond that. So if the reportable test, you have not.
We also have the similar deal, but still they also say that we can't run one test at a time because their cost increases.
No, wait, Apra, you have to be considerable for the vendors also, na? आप ऐसे नहीं कर सकती हैं कि एक टेस्ट लगा दिया और 6 कंट्रोल साथ में लगा दिए. You have to be, I mean, you have to be fair enough with them also, and with yourself also, and with your management also, isn't it? So we will never do that. One test is run at one time. We won't do that, isn't it? So I have a my center is a testing center for all my hubs in Max. And we are running it. Actually, it is a flawless system that runs without any problem. Without any problem. And I had Madam Sadhana also associated with me earlier. And I don't think so we ever had any problems. There was inventory
problems. Only for SDP, ma'am. If somebody persists that yes, we need NAT for SDP, only then we go for it. Otherwise, as a routine for SDP, we don't go.
No. So SDP is never tested for a NAT. You have to make a SOP.
My topic was actually NAT in SDP.
Why should one SDP be tested for a NAT? Yes. I don't know. So that way means they have to be charged. We have to give the money as per reportable test. That is what I wanted to put in. Thank you.
So I would request if Dr. Rajesh Sawant could join us in this, because I believe I've heard a talk where they have made a model where SDP testings have been NAT tested and they have a fully voluntary program going on. We have Dr. Rajesh Sawant live now.
Yeah. Thank you, Aikash. So yes, in fact, before this, I also wanted to just make a comment about the non-NAT tested component issue. So in fact, very commonly what happens is that your NAT testing is going on and you have a situation where the unit has to be issued. After say 2 or 3 hours, you're going to get the results of your NAT testing. That's very, very common at our setup. You know, especially in the last pandemic period, we faced this. And therefore, as a CAP requirement and as per the hospital policy, we obtain consent from the treating physician about issue of non-NAT component. And when the test results are out, the results are communicated to them because already the test is ongoing. So you can't, stop the test in between because you are issuing a unit. So that's one very peculiar scenario which I wanted to just share with all of you. As far as the SDP donation is concerned, what we have done is, yes, we try to, have all the platelets also, means the SDPs also tested for NAT. So for which during the donor counseling itself, the donors are requested to give their sample whenever they want to give for testing. And we have decided the validity period for that NAT testing. So NAT need not be done on the same day. If a donor had say some time at his disposal and has given his sample 3-4 days back, and then he is donating over this weekend, then we consider that NAT result as valid for accepting his donation. Anyhow, on that same day evening NAT testing batch, the SDP sample will also be included for the NAT test. So that is how we ensure that all the platelets are also covered for NAT. So this works beautifully when you have regular donors, repeat donors for platelet testing. If the validity period for NAT test result is 15 days, then the donor is generally valid for donation, and the product of course goes for testing. So that is how we've been able to walk the tightrope as far as NAT testing requirement is concerned.
So this SDP testing program will be very good if there is a more of the voluntary donors for SDP, and they are happily coming to give blood first for the testing and then for the products.
Absolutely.
So I think hats off to sir if you could manage it. I don't think many centers could have achieved this thing. The people have actually come, given their blood, gone back and come back 2 days later. Wonderful, sir. If you could achieve it, hats off. We salute you.
Yeah, so there are situations sometimes where that may not be possible, but I can say I think about 90% definitely is possible. There would be 10% emergency situations, so we can definitely try.
I think for us the numbers will be completely reversed. But again,
that's really great and commendable, I would say.
And that's in the
really
there's the question: how can NAT yield be confirmed? I would request if any of the panelists could take this question. It's open house. If you want to answer this question and you're not a part of the panel, you feel free. I think Dr. Amit answer this.
Yeah, can I take this question? I'm Dr. Sudha. Yeah, you can confirm the NAT yield by sending it for a PCR testing for a viral load. That is one thing which we can do for confirming a NAT yield.
Right, ma'am. So I think the question that they have asked is how it is confirmed. We send the resample and the company people will do it for you. It is their job to do it for you. They'll run the test for free, and then they will confirm in date and however and for PCR test it and tell you whether the NAT is there.
Okay, right at the beginning, I think there is an understanding with the facility, the company, that any NAT yield, they should reconfirm it with the PCR. At least you know that it's a double check and you're not discarding the unit unnecessarily.
You are mute.
Any further comments on it, sir?
I would say yes, it has to be done through the company person only, and need to be paid by them only, because our management will not support for this. That is the only way to take care of this viral load.
Right, sir. So that brings us to an end to this amazing, discussion with all the people actively participating. And thank you all, the panelists, the chairpersons, the moderator, everybody. Thank you so much. Let me get back to Dr. Rasika Sethia, ma'am, to please take it forward. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aikash. And a lot of question answers have already been answered, but I will still request Dr. Navjyoti to take up a few questions because we have a little time, a little more, we can squeeze in a little more questions. So Dr. Navjyoti does not need any introduction, and I think he's the face of Atom India, and also he's represented, India with the AABB. So all of us know him very well. Over to you, sir.
Dr. Setia, thank you very much, but I'm very ill prepared to say anything because I'm in the kitchen washing my utensils because
Okay.
my wife has got COVID, so I'm
Oh.
attending her. So it's okay, but I request all of you to attend.
I want to ask you one question. What is the wastage load in your kitchen as of now?
Dr. Amit, I am safe till now, taking all precaution. And I request all of you to attend our 16th, annual conference that is in Jaipur. And Dr. Gajendra Gupta, Dr. Sadhna, Dr. Sangeeta, all the Indian chapter members, you are also member of Indian chapters, are working overtime. And this is going to be a very good conference with participation for around 29 countries. And there are already 190 abstracts have submitted. So please join it. We, because this is a ATAM forum, we'll request you to become more active. We have got lots of programs. We need actually volunteers like you all. Many of you are already, associated, like Dr. Amit is associated with the website, like we have got multiple working groups. We actually got this idea from other organizations. So this is WhatsApp based. Some of you are members. So I request everybody to participate, and there's nothing like other organizations. We all same organizations and we all are working for the blood transfusion workers. So without taking it further, India is going to have good time in case of blood transfusion services. Many new things are coming. Another good news probably I can give you, there's a standard on blood transfusion services, which we started working in 2017. Many hiccups. Ultimately, it is going to be published within probably within a month or so. Everything is done. That will give a new document to fall back on. And our last standard was published in 2007, so it is badly needed. Thank you, Dr. Setia, giving me this time, and I think we are overstood the time. Thank you very much, and God bless everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Navjyoti, and wishing ma'am a speedy recovery, and wish to see you back in action soon. And over to Dr. Sadhna for the vote of thanks, and thank you everyone for attending the session. Over to Dr. Sadhna.
Thank you, Rasika. So here we are coming to the close of 5th of the series of ATOM India chapter webinar, TM discussion and at tea time. And I hope everybody must have enjoyed the tea. And today we had 58 attendees with us. Of course, number is a little low than the previous one, but still encouraging the type of the discussion we had it. So on behalf of ATOM India chapter, I'd like to thank Dr. Navjot Chaudhary, Dr. Gajen, Dr. Sangeeta Pathak. In spite of their busy schedules, they were really guiding us, doing the work and managing and coordinating with everyone. So indeed grateful to all the eminent speakers for their excellent presentation, the panelists and the quiz master for sharing their knowledge amongst everyone and their experiences as well. So I'm thankful to Imicor Inc., Fresenius Kabi and Grifols for supporting the event. And once again, my sincere thanks to all the participants without whose presence it would not have been possible to such a grand success. So to conclude, let me once again reiterate that without you all, we'll never have such a encouraging dream to have the interacting and knowledge sharing webinars. So thank you one and all. See you next webinar. And I hope Dr. Ekaj would share the quiz winner soon and we'll communicate accordingly in person to whosoever is the quiz winner for this month. So enjoy the upcoming series of the conferences and the new year. Happy New Year to all. Goodbye.